Welcome to Support Life, a program focusing on current social issues from a life-affirming perspective. I'm Gavin Baulch, and later in the program we will be featuring the street talk interviews that we recorded last December, and this is with the general public in the Bourke St Mall in the city of Melbourne. But for now, our guest is Peter Coventry from Pro-Life Victoria. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you, Gavin.
We had a little chat before, and we have a few things in common.
We do.
Apprenticeship.
Yes.
Drummer.
Yes.
Okay, so tell me about your apprenticeship.
Well, I was looking for some work over the school holidays back in 1972, and I was just banging on factory doors, as one did then, and asking if they had any work that I could do to keep me amused and get a little bit of money so I could buy bits and pieces for my motorbikes. And anyway, I got offered an apprenticeship, and I completed the trade. 3.5 years. The schooling was at Collingwood Technical College, which was interesting because my father went to Collingwood Tech many moons ago, and that was that. And I then went on and did various other things after that. Despite being very good at the trade, I'd pretty much sort of made up my mind that that's not what I was going to do for the rest of my life. And it was the greatest reality check I'd ever had, because I can remember my first day on the job, and we'd start at 7:30 in the morning, and I just thought the day would never end. The day just seemed to go on forever. You had 10 minutes break for morning tea, half an hour for lunch, and you worked solidly through after lunch till 3:30. So I'd be getting out of work about the same time the kids were coming out of school. I'd be walking home with them, but of course I'd started significantly earlier and had a lot less breaks. So it's that old saying, be careful what you wish for, because sometimes what you had before, like school, wasn't so bad after all.
I was of the same ilk and mind. Took up a trade because I said it was artistic in the printing industry, and the first day on the job was like, oh, I have to go to school as well as sign an indenture. But it's good. Trade work is good. You went from banging on doors to banging on drums?
Yes. So it was actually while I was an apprentice, somewhere along the way I'd got this idea that drumming would be a good thing, and I remember I bought this banged up old kit from a kid at school. This would probably be about year 10, and I can't remember what I paid for it, but I just started hacking away on it, and then we formed a band. We were a bit unusual at the time because we had two girls in the band, yes. One bass guitarist, and we used to drive mum and dad crazy, rehearsing Ticket to Ride in the bungalow at the back of our place. And anyway, so that went on to other things, and eventually I was actually doing a couple of years later, doing a bit of paid work at Greek functions, where they would have a Greek band, and we would provide the sort of the rock and roll side of it and more popular music for the kids.
Great. Now, one of the things that came out of this was an unusual name for a group. It was called Where's Michael? Is that right?
Oh well, that's the current band, and the unusual name came because we couldn't think of a name, and we had to have a name for our graduation performance, and Michael was one of the early members of the band for one rehearsal, and for reasons of his own personal reasons he couldn't continue on, so we just decided then that the band would be called Where's Michael, because we couldn't think of anything better.
Now that takes us into from a light-hearted into a more serious note. Women who are going through post-abortion trauma will often walk around the house at night saying, where's Michael, where's Billy, where's Susan, where's Mary, because they've thought about a name for the child that they have had aborted. And there is this longing now, where is the child?
Well, I know someone personally who's going through that. Amongst the many difficulties she's having, I then found out that there is a history of an abortion back in an earlier time, and I think the interesting thing about this is that is the suppression of what's happening at the time, and certainly in what I've read, what resurfaces later and becomes, manifests itself in some very strange ways and very strange behaviours. And the damage, the long-term damage that is a result of that is something that's not fully recognised, in fact barely recognised, which is a real concern.
Mm. Now, you're married and have 2 great kids.
Correct.
Great. And you had an epiphany, though, before marriage, I think, and about the future. And what industry was that?
So when I got involved in computers, so I knew it was a thing of the future, and we're talking sort of the late 70s or thereabouts. And I remember once I'd spoken to someone in a conversation, and he was a computer operator, and I just thought this was just fantastic. That this was science fiction sort of type of thing, and I thought, oh, how great would it be to be that? And at the time, I was doing various sort of clerical types of roles, and I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd get that opportunity. And the opportunity came knocking one day in a most unusual form. I was working for IBM at the time as a typewriter technician. I would repair the electric typewriters, the old golf ball typewriters, and I just struck up a casual conversation with the owner of a software company, and he offered me a job as a trainee programmer, and basically never looked back, and I'm still in the industry now.
Yes. In fact, that took you overseas early in your life.
It did, and the wonderful part about that was, of course, I got to fly at the pointy end of the plane. I got to ride business class, which I thought it had, at the time, I thought it had to be the nearest thing to heaven after I'd been used to sort of riding out the back in economy. Look, that was a great experience, and it was a different experience too, because I wasn't just backpacking around. Somebody else was, I was paid to stay in a reasonable hotel, and I was actually getting paid for what I was doing. So, fantastic experience. And to see South Africa, and that was one of the assignments in the. It was still the just before the post-apartheid days, so this was in the late 80s, and we couldn't fly in directly into Qantas wouldn't fly directly into South Africa. I had to go via Zimbabwe.
Yes.
Very interesting and quite eye-opening.
Okay, now talking about flying business class at the pointy end of the plane, we were talking about marriage and the kids coming along and how awesome that journey was, and you likened sort of pregnancy to travelling economy class for a number of hours. And would you like to give me that analogy again?
Well, I was hoping you wouldn't bring that up, because that might offend some of your female viewers. But I was trying to think of it's to me it was like that. Well, the nearest thing I could think of was that difficult journey, long haul journey, where you're cooped up. Particularly me with being reasonably tall, you're cooped up in a plane in this little capsule for up to 28 hours and at a time, and then you finally get off the end of your destination, and of course it's wonderful, and you're so happy to get off the plane safely, and you're at your holiday destination, and you just immediately forget about all the discomfort you've just had. And I sometimes wondered whether childbirth was a bit like that. But having seen what my wife went through, and then the smile on her face, of course, when she's got the baby in her arms, then I'd hope that all the pain and discomfort that she'd suffered was worth the result.
Good. Well, I'm sure there'll be many of those watching who will empathise, sympathise and forgive you at the same time. We want to just sort of move on to the fact that you're part of pro-life, and what was one thing that attracted you to it?
Well, it was some time ago, and it was around about 1983, I think. I was shown a presentation about abortion. At the time, I didn't really, and as I mentioned to you earlier, I was pretty much calling myself an atheist at the time. So I didn't know much about the issue. I'd vaguely sort of heard about it, and my view at the time would have been, oh well, if someone doesn't want to keep a baby, probably the best thing, have it aborted. It's who wants unwanted kids. But once I listened to the presentation, and particularly saw what was a an actual third trimester abortion, it really changed. So it was a defining moment for me. It changed my view, and I just thought, no, it's just wrong. I don't care how you package it, it's wrong. There's something fundamentally wrong here. And then finding out what really goes on, and not just listening to all those empty slogans about my rights, my body, my this, my that. I found out a lot more about what it's really about, and became quite ashamed of. I saw, in some respects, that abortion was something that was very convenient for irresponsible men, and I saw this as possibly helping them, well, in that sort of stupid sense, yes, than the women, because they could just basically walk away from their responsibilities. And it was too easy for them to do that.
Well, Peter, on that note, we'll come back to some more information and detail. You're watching Support Life, and we'll be back after the break. Welcome back to Support Life. I'm Gavin Baulch, and our guest Peter Coventry from Pro-Life Victoria is with us, and we're continuing our conversation.
We are indeed.
You touched on perhaps a man's perspective and how the abortion was kind of serving men a little bit. It was an interesting point of view, because often men don't know what to think when they find that their partner or wife is having an unexpected pregnancy. They're usually just silent.
And I've also seen that there's a lot of, I've read about a lot of cases where too, it's often that the woman is very keen to continue the pregnancy, and she's in fact being pressured by the husband, boyfriend, whoever, to discontinue, to have the abortion, which I find, really quite sad. Yeah. I find it also obnoxious that we're sometimes there's a tendency to try and shut us out of the debate, that it's not our issue. I mean, it's very much our issue. We should share the responsibility. And I remember one of the slogans from Gough Whitlam was that, we can't be going into people's bedrooms. And Gough Whitlam clearly didn't understand that abortion doesn't take place in people's bedrooms. It takes place in abortion clinics. And this notion of choice, well, to me, the choice is when two people get together, and that is the moment of choice. And I would often say to my kids, well, if you're prepared to get together sexually, then you must be prepared for these outcomes, and you must be prepared for the potential of this outcome, that there could be a child involved, and you must be prepared to take responsibility. And the question is, are you prepared to take responsibility? And if the answer is no, then don't engage in the first place.
There's a very interesting set of statistics that come out of Uganda, and that is that their AIDS pandemic was sort of over the 30% mark, and they introduced an ABC policy. A for abstinence, B, be faithful to the partner or the spouse, C, condoms if necessary. They're the only country in the world that's reduced that percentage, 30% plus, down to 5 and 6% because of that point. They had an education process that ran through, and a lot of the young people saw the truth in it and the benefit, and they have reduced their AIDS by, 300%. Amazing.
It is, but not totally surprising, because often the outcome that you think you'll get, this notion that if you put condom vending machines everywhere, you'll get less AIDS. You put condom vending machines everywhere, you get less unwanted pregnancy. Well, the reverse tends to happen. And myself and my wife often discuss what we call our sort of white flag theory, which is where parents sort of run the white flag up the pole and say, well, I'll let my kids have my daughter or my son have their boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, sleep over, because I'd rather they they're under my supervision than out, having conjugal act in a car or having sex and behind a bush. And we don't accept that sort of thing. We say no, that's you're really just giving in too easy, and you're also not giving kids credit for being able to abstain. There's nothing wrong with abstinence. I mean, I abstain from chocolate. I love chocolate, but there's times when I have to abstain from it. So we should give them more credit for being responsible and not just thinking that they're just animals that can't behave themselves.
Yes. I think too, when you started with your interest in IT, computer programming, you were a very logical person. Maybe atheist might have been a title that you gave yourself. But as you applied reasoning to the abortion issue, you just came to a conclusion that it is wrong, that somewhere you'd learnt right and wrong.
Correct. And it's very important to be able to know the difference between right and wrong. And I knew that in my heart of hearts that if I tried to stack up an argument for abortion, I'd be kidding myself and lying, because I knew the facts. I didn't fail biology at school, the little bit that I did that I remember, and we were taught, that human life begins at conception, end of story. And yet there's people that will still argue that point today. And they just defy logic, they defy reason, and just try to bombard you with rhetoric and basically empty slogans. I mean, the truth is there, and anybody who bothers to find their way through the lies and deception will find the truth. And that's what the movement has always hoped, that people will, the pro-life movement has always hoped that people will eventually see the truth. The penny will drop. They will join the dots eventually.
And I think too, young people today are very media savvy. They can do their online research and take a little bit more time, move out of this white noise environment, go for a drive in the bush and just stop and think, look at the green grass and the trees and I'm a man, I'm a woman, what's going on here? The truth will eventually dawn because of the research and access to information that's there.
Yes, and thankfully, at least now, that's one of the positive sides of the internet. The internet has a lot of not so positive sides, but one positive side is that there is plenty of information you can find out there. And we provide a lot of that information ourselves on our website. Yes. And in fact, the very genesis of Pro-Life Victoria was to be an educational organisation to essentially provide that information to people, so people knew the truth and they're not just listening to the lies and deception that sadly the mainstream media are prepared to perpetuate.
Yes. So Peter, faith has a part to play in where you are at the moment?
Yes, very much so. As I mentioned earlier, I think I mentioned earlier, in my early 20s, when I first saw the pro-life presentation, I would have described myself as an atheist. And at the time, I saw it very much as a human rights issue, and that putting any religious beliefs aside, that this was just pure and simple human rights, that there was, you either acknowledge that a life is being taken or you don't, but you really can't hide that fact. And then as time went on, I guess, and partly as a result of rubbing shoulders with people in the movement, my faith and just maturing generally restored somewhat.
So at the moment, with family and friends and your daughter's in the health industry?
That's correct, and I'm delighted that she's in the health industry and she can help people. It's a fantastic thing. I'm really, I think it's great if you can help other people with their health.
Yep, and I think that's what's important, just thinking of others rather than ourselves. Thank you.
Very much so. Thank you.
You're watching Support Life, and that's all for our conversation with Peter. But stay tuned, because after the break, we'll be back with the Street Talk interviews that we recorded last December with members of the general public in Bourke Street in Melbourne.
Hello Helen, welcome to Support Life on Channel 31. Do you consider you value human life and why?
I certainly do value human life. It's very important and precious.
Tell us, what do you know about the current abortion law in Victoria?
I don't know anything really because I'm from Sydney.
Have you or anyone you know ever been affected by the loss of a loved one? And how did this make you feel?
I myself has been affected by the loss of loved ones, so it makes me feel dreadful, actually. Yeah, shocking.
If you heard that a pregnant woman died, for example in a car accident, would you consider the child in her womb as a second death or not?
Yes, I would. Definitely.
When does human life begin and why?
It begins in inception, really.
Would it be safe to say that a baby is considered human at 3 to 6 months in the womb?
Yes, definitely.
At what point would you consider the development human?
At the beginning, at the inception.
Under what circumstance would it be justifiable to terminate a child in the womb?
No circumstance whatsoever.
So it wouldn't be justifiable for gender selection?
No, definitely not.
Do you think people are influenced by political and social pressures to abort a child?
No, I don't think so. No, not political, no.
Why do you think they choose to abort?
Probably selfishness, really.
In Australia, 100,000 unborn children are aborted yearly. What do you think of this?
I think that's pretty shocking.
And if another sector of human race were so mistreated, would you be motivated to stand up and to do something about it?
Definitely, yes. It's murder. Yes.
What would you be prepared to do?
Probably go to the governments that are concerned and allowing these things to happen. Definitely. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today, Helen. It's been wonderful speaking with you.
Thank you.